Hi there. This week's question is Wi-Fi networking problematic? My name is Steve. This is TQA Weekly. Wi-Fi networking is seen as problematic for many advanced applications, needs, environments, and while it may be problematic, is Wi-Fi itself always problematic? This is what I intend to help you with today. The biggest issues with Wi-Fi are frequency, overlapping of frequencies more related to channels, the number of devices on a given frequency, distance, electromagnetic interference, and the hotspot itself. If we talk about the issue of frequencies, let's talk about the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. You see, if the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum is the spectrum you intend to use, this is a problematic frequency. Too many devices are either on the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum or can only use the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. The more devices that you have on a given spectrum, the more interference you're going to have from the various devices and the more problems you're going to have. So obviously the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum is problematic in itself. The next issue is the overlapping of frequencies, aka channels, we'll just say it like that. In a 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, channels overlap. This is less of an issue with more modern frequencies, but in a 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, you're going to have some serious overlap. As in, like, channel 2 overlaps channel 1 and channel 3, and every single channel is like that. So if you wanted to separate two networks, you have to have two channels in between them, meaning that channel 1 and channel 4 don't overlap, but the others in between do overlap each other. So if you were to use like channel 1 and channel 3, you do have interference in there. Now the next issue is the number of devices on a given channel and frequency. And this is not something that can be easily solved. There is a maximum number of devices that can be on any network. It's 255. However, that will create so much interference, so much channel traffic, that the hotspot itself will just basically cease to function properly. You'll have too much lag and nothing will work properly. So obviously, you can't have too many devices on the same channel at all because that will create too much of a problem in that frequency. And you can't have too many on the same hotspot because that will also cause an issue. Distance is also a problem because distance implies that it has to go farther away and still maintain a strong signal. You're also going to have lag or excessive ping because the channel itself, regardless of which one it is, isn't set up for distance. They're set up as a way to communicate. The distance part is the problem because it takes longer for the signal to go back and forth. And the weaker the signal, the slower the signal will be. So that just happens to be a problem. You also have electromagnetic interference, EMI. There is literally nothing you can do about it except use higher quality cables to deal with it in RJ45. However, when we're talking about Wi-Fi, it is going to be problematic and there's not much you can do about it except using frequencies that are not as vulnerable to it. 2.4 gigahertz is vulnerable to EMI from your microwave and many old cordless phones. So obviously that would be an issue. The next biggest issue is the hotspot itself. The older the hotspot, the more issues it's going to have with newer tech, as it's going to default to older frequencies. You want to have a better experience, get newer devices, newer hotspots, and don't use the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. And you will have a much better experience that just happens to be faster, have a stronger signal for further, be more immune, not completely, but more immune to EMI, and also just be able to do a lot more with a better range. And especially if you're avoiding 2.4 gigahertz, you won't have as much of an overlapping of channels, meaning less interference between the channels themselves. So, is Wi-Fi problematic? It is if you're using a 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. That is definite. But if you are going to use anything else other than the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum and you're using a modern Wi-Fi router, you're going to have a much better experience. Just remember, you always have to deal with the number of devices on your network. The greater the number of devices, the more issues you're going to have. So in this case, you might want to have more than one hotspot to deal with that. But for the rest of it, it is fairly simple. Just use a more modern hotspot and avoid the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. And then your Wi-Fi won't be as problematic, and you won't necessarily be as tied down to Ethernet cable either. You won't access some of the higher speeds that you can with basically wired internet, but some of those options seem to be too expensive and kind of a niche case anyway. So to answer the question, is Wi-Fi networking problematic? It is if you're using older channels and tech. For the rest of it, you just have to upgrade and you'll have a lot less issue with Wi-Fi. And if you want an extra tip that will make your life a lot simpler, install your Wi-Fi hotspot in the middle of the zone that you intend to service. This way, you won't have much of an issue with your Wi-Fi anywhere in your home or business place. So, like this episode if you like it, dislike it if you didn't, share with those you think benefit from this, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for topics, email me at ask@tqaweekly.com or go to my website, tqaweekly.com, where you can see the show notes on this episode, past others, find other ways of subscribing, and use the contact form and email me directly. And if you want to see me play video games, I play every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at twitch.tv/zaxxas1981. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.